Hello, online marketing rock stars. We just saw a couple of rock stars in the video from the 80s. I think there were some very fine rock stars back then. Some of them had interesting hairstyles. We don't quite carry our hair like that anymore today. But two things happened in the 80s that are very relevant for our conversation here today. The first one is, of course, the introduction of the World Wide Web. And the second one is people standing up for data privacy. Now, I grew up in the 80s, and I recall very vividly the conversations, and not only conversations, actually the demonstrations about the Volkszählung here in Germany. And I recall sitting in my high school with my German teacher, a chap called Herr Nickel, and we were discussing intensively back and forth the pros and cons of the Volkszählung. And as young kids growing up, we didn't want to become what we called gläserne Bürger, or fully transparent citizens. We were concerned about the safety and the privacy of our data. And I think that story of the Volkszählung and the privacy consciousness here in Germany in the 80s is still with us today in 2019. It's the reason why we have a special privacy consciousness in Germany today. We all want our data to be safe, we want our privacy to be protected, and we want to be in control. The second thing that happened in the 80s was in 1989, of course, the invention of the World Wide Web. So Tim Berners-Lee, at that time at CERN, famously wrote a paper that was called Information Management, a Proposal. And he submitted it to his boss, who wrote on it, vague but exciting. And I think that notion of vague but exciting, we still see some elements of that today in our conversations about the web. Of course, all the wonderful things that the web has enabled, all the opportunities, the content in the web, depend on a well-functioning advertising ecosystem. So the great apps that we all use, the content we like to serve, depend on there being advertising that funds this, right? And all of us in this room are in some way part of the advertising ecosystem. Some of us are advertisers, some are publishers, some are tech providers, maybe some of you are all three at the same time. And my sense is that for a long time, data privacy and the online advertising ecosystem have struggled with each other. And it has felt like at some point they've even been opposed to each other. Now this can no longer be. We live in a privacy-first world. And that means that we have to respect users' privacy as an industry. In the 1980s, thousands of people got up to demonstrate for data privacy. And today it's not thousands, it's millions of people who want their privacy to be protected. They demand from us as an industry that we safeguard their data. They want transparency about how we use their data, and they want to be in control. So I think ultimately our advertising ecosystem, our whole industry, can only work if we make it work for every participant in it, for users, for advertisers, and for publishers. And I think we face two significant questions as an industry. How do we create ads that work in a privacy-first world? How does that actually work? And how do we live up to these new expectations about privacy, which are our users' expectations, but they're really also our own expectations? So let's start with the users. What do users want? Well, there's lots of surveys about how users think about privacy, and one of them says that 86% of global internet users demand transparency about how their data is being used. They want to understand the benefits of why they should share data, and they want to see a clear link between sharing data and then getting something in return. Now, at Google, our philosophy on that is quite simple. We want to protect users first. We want to do more for our users, and we want to do it with less data. In fact, we challenge our engineering teams, what is the least amount of data that you can use to deliver more helpful products to our users? So when we talk about Google products, they have many users. Billions of users entrust us with some of their most precious content, right? With photos, with files, with email. And that data is our users' data. It's private, and we lock it up for them. We don't use it for advertising. Users also trust us with data about their activity. So that activity data, for example, what you've searched for, what kind of videos you've watched for, that actually is quite helpful for building better products. So for example, we may show users the fastest route home after a long day at work. Or we may show you a picture of a special moment in your life if we know that it was a year or two ago. We may alert you to offers in a store if we know that a store that you're nearby has a particular offer. But there are some things that we will never do, and I want to be very clear about that. We do not sell personal information to anyone, ever. And we also do not use sensitive information about people for advertising purposes or for targeting. And we also don't use device fingerprinting to make targeting better and things like that. So we're very clear on how to look at personal data and how to use it and what not to do. And when we speak to users, we know what they want is transparency and control. The way we create that is the Google account. And the Google account is something that has been developed by engineers actually here in Germany, in Munich, in our engineering center. It's the one-stop shop where you can see all the data that Google has about you and where you can basically control that data. You can decide what to do with it. It provides you with both transparency as well as these simple-to-use controls. So for example, you can decide whether you want to use products in a personalized way or not. You can decide if you want your search history to be stored or not, or your YouTube watch history to be stored or not. Now, I think many of us like the benefit of having our activity inform some of the products and to make them better. So we like the fact that that activity is there. But perhaps we don't want that data to be stored forever and all the time. So just last week, we announced some controls that I think are very useful in the sense that you can decide to auto-delete any and all of your activity data after 3 or 18 months. So I often hear the comment, and in fact, Philipp, you've asked me a couple of times, that's all great, but do people actually use any of these products? Do they care? Does it even matter what you do? And it turns out they really do. So we see that in the usage of our products. So for example, the Google account is being accessed by more than 2.6 billion users every year. And they don't just go to the account to look it up, they also make adjustments to their settings that fit their individual needs and preferences. That's also true for advertising. So we have a section in the Google account that deals with advertising, and more than 30,000 people go to that section every hour. So while we sit here on stage, or while you sit there and I stand here on stage, probably about half, 15,000 people will be visiting their ad settings. What can they do there? Well, they can decide what kind of ads they would like to see, what interests them and what doesn't, or they can completely opt out of any ads personalization. And we would like these controls and the Google account to be as easy to find for anybody as possible. Not hard to find, not hidden, but actually easy to find. So we're putting access to those settings into each one of our products. Very simple. Whether you're in search, in YouTube, in Chrome, or in the Assistant, you should just always have access to your account settings and your privacy information. So we're rolling that out later this month. Now, people are using these controls. We're bringing them into our products, and we know that they work. The web obviously needs to work for users. It also needs to work for publishers. And I'm imagining many of you are publishers in one form or another. You may have your own websites, you may have your own apps. So the question is, how do you make money? Because the web requires you to have a model to make money. And we want to make sure that that works for you. So we provide platforms, advertising platforms that hopefully some of you use, like AdSense or the Google Ad Manager, where we help you run ads on your websites. Again, the question is, does that work? Can publishers make any money with that? Turns out that last year we paid out $14 billion the publishers in our advertising networks. So that's an enormous number, $14 billion to publishers, which I think shows that this advertising ecosystem actually works quite well for publishers as well. Now, in order to be a part of this network and to profit from ads as a publisher, you also have to play by the rules, and that's really important. In our case, that means you have to respect the user experience more than the ads. And unfortunately, we all know that the web is not only full of great content, it's also full of problematic, deceptive, and sometimes even illegal content. So we take that very seriously as well, and we have sort of 20 years of experience in dealing with strange content on the web and with publishers who may not be playing by the rules. To give you a sense of the order of magnitude, just last year we removed more than 700,000 publishers and app developers from our network because, in fact, we found that they were not playing by the rules. And when we talk about Europe, part of the rules, of course, also are all the legal requirements. For example, the GDPR requirements. I can't believe that it's just a year ago that we were sitting here at OMR and discussing the introduction of GDPR. It feels like a long time ago. So one of the key publisher requirements in GDPR is, of course, consent. So as a publisher, you need to have the consent of users to be storing their data and to be personalizing their experiences. And we know that's hard for publishers if your core business is not actually getting consent from users. So we've developed a tool that makes that easy. You can use it on your website, you can use it in your app. It's a fairly simple tool in order to make sure that as a publisher, you comply with these requirements and you can pass on that signal to ad networks that you work with. We also make it easy for publishers to decide, do we want to use personalized or non-personalized ads? Because again, we hear from publishers that's a choice you would like to make. Now, in some cases, we are also a publisher, and we realize that on our platforms as well, we have to live up to the expectations and the standards of our users, and that includes YouTube. So our goal is to make sure that YouTube is a trusted environment, an environment that both users and advertisers can trust. And we recognize that there have been instances when content has appeared on YouTube that was inappropriate, in some cases even illegal, and we've also had instances where ads appeared next to that content. So let me be very, very clear on that to all of you, because many of you are advertisers and publishers and content creators. Our key priority is to live up to our responsibility, whether it is to users, to our creators, or to advertisers. And that means that we take aggressive action to protect users from inappropriate content. And we do that in a number of ways. We do it through policies and enforcement, we do it through technology, and through people. So on the policy side, just in the last 12 months, we've rolled out 30 significant changes to our policies for content on YouTube and enforced them quite strictly, which means the bar has now been rising quite significantly for what kind of content we allow and also what kind of content is allowed to monetize, so to show ads. As a technology company, of course, we also use technology for detection, and that helps us a lot to make sure we spot a lot of violations very early before even the first people would see them on the site. And then finally, people, because ultimately we believe in human reviews of these topics, of the content, of questionable content. We want human reviewers to make these decisions, and we have significantly increased the number of people doing this. So I say that because I want you to know that we take our obligation and our responsibility very seriously to create the kind of environment on YouTube that is actually suitable for brands, that is safe for our users, and that people can trust in. And let's talk about advertisers. And you kicked this off in the morning, not only with some predictions on the future, but also you talked about what do advertisers really want, right? One of the things you said in your speech was, how do we make our consumers, our users care? What are the ways that we can make them care? And as an industry, we talk a lot about data-driven marketing, data being the key to making people care so that you understand who is interested in what. I think data-driven advertising for us as an industry has been great. It has helped us both increase performance as well as lower costs. But as online marketers and as advertisers, in a privacy-first world, we have to ask the question, where does all the data come from for data-driven advertising? How was it collected? Do we have the user consent to actually apply it? And so earlier I talked about the fact that we challenge us at Google to not only look for more data, but to do more with less data. And I think that is an insight that I'd like to share with advertisers as well. I think the key question for you as advertisers ultimately is, how do you build the best advertising experiences with only the most relevant data? Because it's not about collecting more and more data per se, it's about understanding what data is really relevant. Now, if you're an advertiser, that oftentimes is your first-party data. It might be, let's say, your sales data, your CRM data. It might be data about product profitability. And if you know that data because it's yours, you're the first party, you're the advertiser, you can use that to really drive data-driven advertising. Or if you work with publishers, many publishers also have really valuable first-party data on audiences that they can share with you, again, if they have consent to do so. And then finally, we as Google can also help you on that, because sort of through our first-party data in a privacy-sensitive way, we can make sure that your campaigns deliver much better. So we use machine learning on our side to help advertisers create what we call the perfect ad campaign, while fully respecting user privacy. Again, this is on an anonymized base of data that we would get from our users. And so that should help you to access any kind of inventory, search, display, video, and app inventory through campaigns like smart campaigns and app campaigns that you can use. And I think the key insight here is, as an advertiser, you no longer have to use or look for all the data in the world, because we can do a lot of the heavy lifting in the background on your behalf. That's the beauty of machine learning, and that's the beauty of the first-party data that we have. So I think together we can actually get this right as an advertising industry. We can build great ad experiences that work in a privacy-friendly way. How do we do that? We have to increase the amount of transparency to users and give users more control. And then we have to actually limit the amount of data that we use to what's really most relevant in order to create helpful and amazing ad experiences. Now let's go back to the 80s one more time. I talked about the invention of the web by Tim Berners-Lee, and just last year, Tim Berners-Lee launched the Contract for the Web. It's a big campaign where he hopes to sign up governments, companies, and individuals really to agree on the principles of the web for the next 30 years, to ensure that we continue to have a thriving web ecosystem. At the core of the Contract for the Web is data privacy. It's the same concern that had people take to the streets already in the 80s here in Germany. The other thing Sir Tim asks all of us as an industry to do is to ensure that people have free and affordable access to the web. And again, I think that's the link to all of us as an advertising industry, because only with online advertising will there be free and affordable access to the web. As a company, we fully sign up to these principles that Sir Tim has outlined. And in fact, we commit to being a partner in this journey. We think there's a way to make advertising work also in this privacy-first world. And we would like to do this with all of you. We would like to partner with you, to innovate you, and to build an amazing ads ecosystem that works for everyone. Thank you very much.
As I did with Adam earlier this morning, I want to ask you a couple predictions. What do you think now, as an advertising executive, what is happening the next 12 months in our ecosystem?
Okay, predictions for advertising. I think about them in 3 Ps, actually. The first P would be privacy, and I talked about that at quite some length already here. The second P, I'm stealing from you, because 2 years ago on the stage you said that podcasts would be really important. And I remember sitting in the audience and saying, what is he talking about? How's podcasts a big thing? And I think you've shown that podcasts actually work and that they drive some relevance. The third thing I would say has to do with personality. So I think as brands, we have to make sure that personality is there, also in a data-driven world. You showed some pretty cool examples this morning already for personalities. And by the way, I think you're a bit of a personality yourself. I hear that you have this magazine. Is that actually true? Is there
it's this one. You're talking about this one, right?
Is that the Philipp magazine? It's
Yvonne wrote this one.
Not so bad looking. I'm just wondering if you have the right cover for the magazine. I mean, it's a good name and all that, but is there like maybe another version that we could, I don't know, like that's Philipp? How about that?
I knew this was coming.
We could go in alternating ways.
I knew this was coming. Okay, personal magazines.
The reason why I show this is also that we have a whole number of these at our booth, and so if your name is Philipp or Philippa or any other name, by the way, you can feel free to pick one up at our booth.
Philipp, one last question more on the serious side. Google and other big platforms have had some more scrutiny, at least to say the least, in the past years. There's been critical commenting. There have been legal issues. Is that exaggerated? Is that like a sort of the retro trend or the against trend to what we've seen earlier? Like everybody was very happy about Google and Facebook and was like celebrating these companies, and now all of a sudden we are living in a different world where these companies are looked at very critically. What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, we've also grown up as companies and become much, much bigger. I think the tech companies have become much bigger. We've become much bigger. So with size comes increasing responsibility and comes an increasing amount of scrutiny. And I think actually that's fair enough. And we have to live up to the public's interest in Google. We have to live with criticism. We have to face it. And then we have to get better. So I'm not concerned about that. I think it is part of becoming a bigger company. The one thing I would say is the focus of the conversation about tech shouldn't only be about large tech companies from the West Coast. I think the focus should be more on innovation and on building successful ecosystems in each part of the world, particularly here in Germany. So if the debate shifts too much on one side and forgets the other, I think that's a problem. But as a company, we understand that we have to answer questions.
All right. Okay. Philipp, thank you very much for coming here, for doing this.
Thank you.
Meet the Google guys at the bar, pick up the magazine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.